Thanks a lot, Dr. Gusenbauer, for offering this very broad perspective. I think, when we look at the title of the lecture, which is about Europe at the crossroads, you really give us a very broad frame and as I said in my introduction, kind of a multifaceted perspective. And I think this is, the ingredients for a very vibrant discussion. And you are providing pointers to try to decipher a very complex environment. So, the floor is open. There were many, many perspectives. So we have about 30 minutes for discussion. Please, you have the floor, and please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Harley Schlanger from the Schiller Institute. And perhaps because I'm an American, I would say we have to go back to this question, it's the economy stupid. In your remarks, you said something about the various challenges, and I think you left the economy in this digitalization versus the industrial age, but I think that's the wrong dichotomy. One of the leaders of the Yellow Vest demonstrations was asked what the problem is, and he said, we're being told that we're facing the end of the world, we're having trouble making it to the end of the week. And I think that a problem in the European Union has been the banking policies. And unfortunately, they followed the American and the London banking policies of allowing speculation as opposed to investment in the real economy. And I'd like you to just address something that I think comes from the China question as well. Why not invest in modernizing infrastructure? And I'm sure I speak for many people in this room, it's getting harder to travel through Germany right now because of infrastructure problems, including with the Deutsche Bahn, the Baustelle on the highways, and so on. So okay. I'd like to throw that out to you.
Thank you. Maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions. Yes, please.
Peter Presper, you gave a quotation from an American liberal regarding the threat going out from US policy. My question is, if the American liberal was rightly quoted that the US is the danger, why did you argue only about Trump? Because when Trump was a president-elect, he said, I want to have normal relations to Russia. I want to end the regime changes. I want to stop the policy in the Middle East because we throw a stone in the bean basket. And then he was elected, and then he started as a president, and the things changed. So if the critic is with regard to US policy, I think is the one, and if the critic is with regard to Trump, it's another, because it's not identical from my point of view.
Thank you. Maybe we'll take a 3rd question, and then Dr. Gusenbauer will respond.
Thank you. Mohammed Sharqawi from Al Jazeera Center for Studies and George Mason University. The electoral victory of Trump was not well received in many capitals around the world, and over the last 2 years, he has nurtured this doctrine of isolation, nativism, and so forth. So I think there is a silver line in all of this in terms of how Europe can have a second reading of this transatlantic alliance, Europe and the United States. So my question is, in short, is how far do you predict a separate European track of foreign policy toward the Middle East, toward the Gulf and other regions, vis-a-vis America's Trumpism and all this controversial foreign policy approach?
Thank you very much for this extremely fascinating questions. When you were referring to the banking sector, being in Germany, of course, I have to cite my good friend Per Steinbrück, who just recently in an interview said, I'm not sure if I would do the salvation or the rescuing of the banks today in the same way I did it back then, because they received a lot and did not take enough responsibility. which from a man like Per Steinbrück I think is a very interesting insight. When you are referring to infrastructure, excuse me, my sore throat, and therefore I have to chew this pill. Infrastructure in Europe, in general, is quite okay. I think when you are referring to infrastructure as a challenge, you're mainly referring to Germany. And this is not a cynical remark from my side. It's a result of a policy where infrastructure investments over many years have been significantly lower compared to GDP than in many other countries. And the way to build infrastructure in times of participatory democracy also is a challenge. And I'm not referring to the Berlin airport. I can tell you I'm the chairman of a quite significant construction company that is also active in Germany. And we are currently building the hall for the new railway station in Stuttgart, Stuttgart 21. And of course, this is a very ambitious architecture that we are trying to realize there. And this train station, together with all the new lines that will cross Stuttgart, I think will go into operation in the year 26 to 27. But you know, the architectural concept is coming from the mid-90s, because already in 1997, the decision of the architectural competition was done. So when we are opening this house, or this new infrastructure, the design of it will be already more than 20 years old. And at that time, then almost 30. And this shows how slow some of the procedures are. Of course, in Stuttgart, we know that also some political problems were connected with it, but this is putting a heavy burden on the infrastructural development. And you know, infrastructure, and I could now talk for hours about infrastructure because it's our business. We give work to 75,000 people in the construction business, and we would love to build more than we do. But you also have a country like Spain, where you build too much infrastructure, where you have airports in some cities of Spain that were never opened, never used. Not a single airplane was ever going there. So we have sometimes a mismatch in resources in Europe, that there are parts where you desperately need this modernization of the infrastructure, and then you have other parts where funds were just used because they were there. And the oligopoly of construction companies over 20 years made quite good business. Is Trump the problem, or is it the US? The citation to which I referred was by Farid Zakaria, of course. And he was not so much referring to fundamental changes in US foreign policy priorities. He was more referring to the, let's call it, erratic way of communication of Mr. Trump, where one has the impression that he is trying to lead the world by Twitter, and where sometimes quite exaggerated remarks are going around the world and circulating around that very easily could create wrong reactions or unintended reactions, because it's not anymore the world of diplomacy, of analysis, of understanding, of trying to get to the real meaning, but the fashion now is to react quickly. And to react quickly with all the arsenals that we have available is a risky business. And I think Farid Zakaria was mainly referring to that. Will there be a reassessment of US-European transatlantic relations? I think that in important foreign policy arenas, you will see increasing differences between the US and Europe. In security policy, I don't see that. Of course, Europeans will try to get a stronger say within the structures that we have right now. Of course, if the pressure is ongoing from the side of the US to increase the contributions to the NATO budget up to the 2%, there will be the intention of the Europeans not to spend the increase only on buying American weaponry and intelligence system, but to invest it in something else too. But fundamentally, I do not see any alternative to the European-American transatlantic security cooperation because, as I said, a Russian card and a Chinese card simply is not available.
Thank you. So we will take a second round of questions, please.
Zimmermann, I'm a journalist, Wirtschaftsjournalist, an economic journalist. I have a couple of thoughts. I'm a very much a pro-free market kind of guy. Free markets are magically productive, and in an era of technological evolution, truly magically. Arthur C. Clarke once said that any civilization with sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I think we're there now with, with artificial intelligence and so on. The trouble with that is that it tends to turn into a winner-take-all situation. And you pointed this out, the passive and the active, the people who really don't have the skills or the IQ to participate in high technology societies. What happens then? And I would add that having looked very closely at the financial system, it seems fairly clear that money concentrates itself. Once you've got a certain amount of money, you don't actually need to do anything except give it to a wealth manager or even just invest it in an index fund, and it concentrates itself. And Thomas Piketty a few years ago did a study about this. And what this means actually is we're going towards a world where there's a financial ownership aristocracy emerging. And this is going to get more intense. I wrote an article a few months ago for Deutsche Welle called "What if Billionaires Live Forever?" Because people like Jeff Bezos of Amazon are actually investing very heavily in life extension corporate technology companies. Yeah? And I think eventually this will succeed. And so you're going to get this kind of interesting thing where people who are already super rich are going to get ever richer. They're not going to die. Their political opinions and influence will be permanently relevant because they're just not going to disappear from the scene. And so we're confronting this very interesting future, and I think that's what's giving rise to a lot, and I'd like to know if you agree with me, a lot of the dissatisfaction, because a lot of people realize wir sind abgehängt. We're not part of this game that's being played, and we're going to be permanent losers, because you cannot save money and buy a house nowadays if you're working in minimum wage or even at 2 or 3 times minimum wage. You just can't. And whereas if you manage to inherit some money, or if you have some sort of shares, you're going to be one of the great winners. So what's the answer to that? And I will say that there are 3 answers I've heard about. Thomas Piketty and a couple of his colleagues came out a week or so ago with something called the Manifesto for the Democratization of Europe. In America, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has come out with a Green New Deal. Mind you, 10 years ago they came out with a Green New Deal too, but it's being recycled as an idea. Those are 2 possible Ansätze. And a third that's sometimes talked about is to create an ownership society by actually distributing shares in corporations without people having earned them, to create a more distributive ownership of society. Do you think any of those approaches make sense? How would you deal with this permanent split between the haves and the have-nots?
Thank you. Please.
Richard Schubert, physicist. Mr. Chancellor, I have a very specific question. You come from Austria, a country which has very close ties of friendship with a federal state of Bavaria. Do you follow what is the dominant party of Bavaria doing on a European level? I mean, they lost some votes in the regional election. Can you give some comments on this?
Thank you. And the lady on the right.
My name is Victoria Arnold. I'm a student at the Hertie School of Governance. I have a question regarding the regulations that you mentioned in the change of digitalization, etc., where regulations do not hold in front of the national border. So why can't the European Union win more people that are excited about it by pushing the agenda on this digital solution, one of them being data, for example? There is a European way, one that puts the consumer in the middle and on the focus. Why can't they promote their initiatives in that sense? And would that be one solution, for example, having taxes on data on a European level that could help get back the European Union identity?
Thank you. We will take a third round of questions, but not now, please, because those three questions were quite substantive, so we will get back to you later on.
Yeah. Well, on the data, I belong to those who cherish privacy. I have no problem with my tax data. This is perfectly fine. But I have a problem with the ongoing reduction of privacy in many elements of human life. And I think we have to stop this tendency. And I also dislike all these attempts of getting rid of cash money. So, frankly speaking, I mean, it's my beer if I buy The Economist or The Penthouse. Who the hell should that be a matter of report in general data systems? So I would like to have the freedom to spend the money that I earn, for which I worked hard, and which I tax properly. So what remains at the end of the day, I want to have it as my decision and not as part of general public scrutiny. And of course, you cannot buy by cash your travel fares and house and cars, etc., etc. But the little things, because as they get to know what I eat, maybe they kick me out of the social insurance sooner or later, no? Because they think that this is not healthy enough, you know, and such a guy should not be a burden for all the others in the social security. And we are loving today, but you know, as soon as all this data is available, it will be used. This we have seen in the past. And therefore, I'm in favor of all what increases the possibilities of states to collect the taxes, but I'm against everything that is further limiting our privacy. Second, Bavaria. I think they had a very interesting result in the elections, no? I mean, my Social Democrat friends really not doing too well, no? But also the party in power received some signals. Up to now, one has the impression that they are not impressed because they continue as they did. So I listened yesterday to the third governmental declaration of Mr. Söder. The learning curve seems to be quite flat still. But they have been economically extremely successful. And Bavaria, as one of the powerhouses in Germany, has a fantastic economic development. Frankly speaking, we in Austria, we also benefit from that because Upper Austria, Salzburg, the Tyrol, those places that are bordering Bavaria, they of course benefit from the enormous dynamism of the industry and the economy in Bavaria. Yes, this is true. This is the downside, that you cannot live in Munich. By the way, you also cannot live in Stuttgart. I recognize that this is the same price level in the meanwhile. But in terms of general wealth that has been created there, I think it was impressive. I can tell you, CSU is perceived in Europe mainly as a troublemaker in Germany that makes the life of Angela Merkel difficult. I think this is the single most important feature of the CSU in Europe. Yes, but first he has to be elected. Second, we will see which strategy he's going to enter if he's elected. But you followed Seehofer against Merkel. I mean, that made Bavaria very prominent over quite some time, and the result you see. But you know what I like is that Borussia Dortmund is 9 points ahead of Bavaria Munich. This is really offering some relief to us. As we belong to the group, wir ziehen den Bayern die Lederhosen aus. So we surely appreciate that. Then the issue of the proposals, how to overcome a situation where the wealth gap in our societies is enormously increasing. You said that many people have the impression that they are abgehängt. Yes. And the problem is, in my understanding, that it's not only the traditional lower classes, but that this sentiment is already affecting parts of the middle class too. And what you say for housing prices in Munich, which is of course higher than in Berlin, but in Berlin the increase is tremendous too. Yeah, everything the same. By the way, Vienna also increasing, being still on a more moderate level. But you know, all these proposals, I know the Piketty proposals, and I did not so much study this ownership society proposal. All the three proposals, I think, go in the right direction. It will be a question of the political decision-making process. How will a package or, let's say, a new narrative look like that is going to bring us in the right direction? You know, sometimes, I mean, why are housing prices in Vienna better than in Munich? They are better. First, you have the municipality of Vienna that owns 220,000 apartments, which is important as a correcting factor for the entire market, because it does not only offer affordable housing to those that are in these apartments, but it's also a correcting factor for the entire market if such a huge amount is going on a different logic. Second, I think it was decided 2 weeks ago, new Vienna Bauordnung. If you want to develop housing in Vienna, 60% of all the apartments that you are building there have to be in the category of affordable housing. Otherwise, the municipality will not give you the permit to build apartments there. Third thing, you have, of course, additional actors in the housing sector in Vienna, which are cooperatives. We call it Wohnungsgenossenschaften, that normally offer better quality than the municipality. So they are in the, let's say, lower middle income range, a very important offer. And then you have, in addition, the public funding for housing in special areas. You have the public funding for the revitalization of old buildings. And you have so-called funding of the individuals that are living in the apartments if their income is below a certain limit. So just as a description of, let's say, 5, 6 7 elements that all together lead to a situation where the housing prices in Vienna are lower than in Munich. There, of course, one can think also about other possibilities how to arrange that, but what I want to explain is that in order to solve a problem or to address a problem, we most of the time need a bundle of instruments in order to reach what we want. There will not be the magic solution where one instrument is going to solve all our problems.
Except maybe an upper limit on personal wealth aggregation. Maybe rich people should have to give their money to a private foundation to be spent back into the public benefit after some cutoff level. 35 million.
No problem for me. No problem.
Okay, we will take a third round of questions, please. The mic is coming.
Are you agree the biggest problem Europe is that we are very small, and we are very old, and the people are not enough to be attractive as a place where export is successful, and etc. etc. I'm sure Trump also think in that direction. And do you mind the refugees could us help? Almost the only help Europe can now have is the refugees, the immigrants. They have to work, and etc. etc. And one contradiction. Today, the international capital do need more the people that are seeking of a job and they are rising. They are immigrants. But today we have the immigrants. This is not a contradiction. Do you think the borders will be more and more opened, or just the opposite? They will soon close, as in past in Europe. And just a tiny questions about Gibraltar. Don't you think problem Gibraltar could lead to explications in old Europe, Brexit, as England and Gibraltar?
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Yes, please.
My name is Zimmermann. Thinking of the European elections, the upcoming ones, which political parties would be closest to the recommendations, to the priorities you outlined a while ago?
Okay, I think we will have to close the questions. Maybe if I can add one in your list of reason for this kind of European disarray, that you presented initially. I think there was one that where I would like eventually you could elaborate a bit further when you mentioned, the crisis of the traditional political system. Now that you have been in the center of the political arena, and now that you have been taking some distance, and also with this, as I said, multifaceted perspective and being involved in business, in academia, in think tanks, would you have any, let's say, pointers or any thoughts on how, we can, in a way, overcome this situation that, in a way, is inherent or, very broadly distributed all around Europe, and that, in a way, will be also emerging or surfacing during the European election. And obviously, there is a lack or a growing discontent vis-à-vis the political system, a political system that have had lots of difficulty to adapt and to adjust to technological change, citizen participation, and where obviously we are witnessing a radical and extremely speed change in many sectors, but where political practice have almost not evolved in the past, let's say, 50 years. So how can we reconcile the citizen with the political representation, and are there any, I mean, from your perspective, recommendation or thoughts about really to, I mean, how to address that?
Well, that's quite a program. First on migration. The most successful migration that is going on in Europe at the moment is the migration from the Ukraine to Poland. 1.5 million Ukrainians are working in Poland, and Poland, as we all know, is the most robust market economy of Europe. One would say, okay, they desperately needed it because 2.5 million people from Poland are living and working in other parts of Europe. But frankly speaking, the recent success of Poland without the Ukrainian immigration would not be possible. I give you another example. I just come back from Latin America, where the Venezuelan refugee crisis, let's call it like that. I mean, it's definitely a crisis in Venezuela, but it's not so much a refugee crisis, despite the fact that millions are going out. So there is 1 million refugees in Colombia from Venezuela, very well-prepared, hardworking people from Venezuela. No clashes between the resident population and the people that are coming in. Chile, 500,000, no problem. Some problems in the northern part of Brazil, where there is around 700,000 coming from Venezuela. Why do I tell that? I tell that because migration is not just a question of numbers, but it's also a question of the cultural fit. I mean, Ukrainians in Poland, why should that be a problem? Venezuelans in Colombia, why should that be a problem? People from Afghanistan in Hintertux may be a problem. So we also have to talk about these cultural cleavages that lead to the different perception of migration. And I mean, migration happened all the time, as we know. We had the domestic migration from the agricultural sector to the cities. We had the migration in Europe for many, many decades, mainly from former Yugoslavia and from Turkey to the industrial centers in Switzerland, Germany, Austria. We were confronted for many, many decades with migration waves that were politically induced. I mean, Austria is a good example. We had a massive flow of immigrants in '56 with the Hungarian crisis, then '68 with the destruction of the Prague Spring. Then millions of people from Poland during martial law were going through Austria. Not that many staying because continued to the US and to other places. And then we had the situation with the war in former Yugoslavia in '91. And still the largest migrant group in Austria are Serbs and Croats, even more than Turks. But you know what is the fastest growing migration group in Austria already for the last 5 years? Germans.
Fleeing high real estate prices.
Fleeing
high real estate.
Not only fleeing higher real estate prices, also coming to study there, so-called numerus clausus refugees and, and people like that, you know. But it's the largest growing number of immigrants at the moment, and of course it's no problem. Huh? But pardon me. But of course the situation with people from Afghanistan and Pakistan, partly Iraq is a little bit different. Syrian refugees also were not such a problem because most of them are Christians and could be integrated. So migration is not a question of numbers alone. It's a question of readiness to integration, cultural cleavages, and this also determines how long it lasts till to adapt to that. Will we have more borders or less borders? I fear we will have more borders than less. This is what I can foresee for the years to come, because we're even building borders where there is no need for borders. In times of fake news, especially if there are electoral campaigns, you have to build fences. This seems to be very attractive. So in the Austrian national elections, there was every day the talk about the different routes, Balkan route and Mediterranean route, and the thousands and thousands of people that are storming into Austria. And then, I mean, it's crazy, but it is. We have this border with Italy, which is the border at the Brenner, between North Tyrol and South Tyrol. And without going into details, many of you will know what this border means. And for the first time, after decades, there was the public demand that we should send the military to this border in order to defend the border against the illegal migration from Italy. And I went there, and I didn't see a single migrant. And I said, how many illegal migrants have been captured in the last days? And the police officers just told me, 1, 2. And I said, where are the thousands? Are they hiding in the woods or in the valleys or wherever? He said, no. But it was very popular to say, we are in danger. We have to close the Mediterranean route. Therefore, we have to put a fence in between the two parts of the Tyrol. And I think for these political purposes, it might happen that we get more borders than less. On Gibraltar, I cannot help you. Frankly speaking, I'm not an expert on this issue. I hate the place. Too many aggressive monkeys there. I was there once. I do not have a special affection for that. Yes, but they're like human beings. Sometimes they're a little bit too greedy, Well, how to save the political system, or at least to rejuvenate it? I think there is a lot of wisdom in the representative democracy. But representative democracy has to be really representative. I, for instance, want to be represented by a person that is decent, is smart, and is representing my interests or visions. And whatever interests I might have, be it local or regional or economic or whatsoever. But it should be somebody who I think can appear on level playing field. I would not like to have a representative sitting in parliament where whenever he talks, I feel ashamed. We call it Fremdschämen in the German language. And this has to do a little bit with the quality of the political class that we have nowadays. That the quality that you need is not always there. And it seems that politicians are more together with others than with the people they should represent. And Berlin is, of course, a fantastic example for a bubble, where most of the politicians will hang out with the same journalists and think tankers and analysts, etc., etc. So with them, they are the entire week. And then maybe they go home for the weekend into their in their local circumscription. And then, of course, they want to rest, and maybe they are together with the family. So my question is, when do they meet normal people? Huh? I mean, in the guest house or football camp or wherever. Yeah? And I think it's very important if you see all these tendencies that are there anyhow, that there are bubbles, that there are problems with real accessibility. You have to open up doors and channels of communication so that people, you will not meet everybody, but that people at least have the impression that they could meet you. And, you know, I'm not the smartest guy, I'm not the most beautiful guy, but I'm a hardworking guy. And part of my political success was that I always was out. I was spending my holidays in walking through Austria, sweating like hell because I'm too heavy, you know. But people joined me and they could discuss with me all issues that they liked. And I went to the schools and to the bars and to the Gasthäuser, but not where you only meet your likes, no? Where you meet the normal people. And I think accessibility in a representative democracy is extremely important, because what is the major problem that we face now? It's the lack of trust. And you know, if people have the impression this guy who is sitting there has nothing to do with me, only looking after his own pocket or his own interest or whatsoever, how should you trust such a person? And if you do not trust a person, why should you then trust his or her political decisions? And I think there are, of course, a bunch of possibilities that one can do and must do, but the re-establishment of trust in a representative democracy, I think, is the key for the rejuvenation of our political system.
Thank you. This will be the last word about trust.
Your question, my party. Your
Trust.
Yeah.
The Trust Party.
I can tell you, I will vote Social Democrats because I'm lacking the fantasy. I voted Social Democrat all over my life. And the top candidate of the Austrian Social Democrats is Andreas Schieder, a very good guy. I like him very much. He's a very good friend. I know him since he's a kid. And he is a good successor of his father in foreign and European affairs. I feel comfortable with him.
Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Gusenbauer for sharing his views and perspective. I would like also to thank everyone for making time and to come tonight. We, on behalf of all my colleagues from the Dialogue of Civilization Institute, I would like to wish you nice holidays and break, you know, for the end of the year. Please also mark in your calendar, as of now, that the next lecture or discussion will be actually a very nice way to continue the conversation we had tonight. On January 23rd, we will have a quite interesting exercise inviting a foreign correspondent from major media here in Berlin for a roundtable sharing their views and outlook about the year 2019. So we will have correspondents from different parts of the world, so this would be an interesting exercise. And on January 31st, we will have the chance to have with us Andreas Schleicher, who is the head of education, knowledge and skills at the OECD, and who also happens to be the inventor of the PISA ranking. So Andreas Schleicher, yeah.
An Austrian.
An Austrian, so. And so this will be a good way to continue the conversation about skills for employability, skills for citizenship, and so stay tuned with the activities of the Institute. Thanks again, Alfred. Thank you.
Pleasure.